Hello and welcome to Kettle and Bones, where we make really delicious, really healthy food. And you can too. The recipe we're making today is a pretty big one. I don't mean that it's a complicated item to make, it's definitely not. I mean that the impact of having this item in your culinary toolbox will be pretty huge. This is one of those objectively delicious treat meals that people miss like crazy when they go low carb. Today, we're bringing it back. We're making soft and crunchy tacos. Let's get cooking. If you've ever made tortillas from scratch before, some of this may seem familiar, except instead of starting with a big old pile of masa, cornmeal, we're using a big old pile of almond flour. This is probably 3 cups, give or take. Secondly, to balance out the texture and make sure things aren't too gritty, I'm adding just about a half cup of lupin flour. Lupin flour is really fine and soft. I like it in this recipe, but it comes from the lupin bean, which is a legume, so if you can't do legumes, you can omit this, or you could go with something like oat fiber instead. Thirdly, I'm adding in some xanthan gum, quite a bit. Most of the time when we use xanthan gum, we're adding a little pinch, maybe a teaspoon or tablespoon or 2. Not today. We're adding probably at least half a cup, maybe 2/3. We need more xanthan gum today so that our tortillas come out soft and pliable, not crusty and brittle. Fourthly, probably about 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And fifthly, a sprinkling of salt. These are the dry ingredients that will give us a good, basic tortilla shell. Now I'm going to add a little seasoning to the mix. Some onion powder, some garlic powder, a little cumin, and one of my favorites, some smoked paprika. And once again, I'm sure you've noticed, I've not actually measured any of these. I didn't even have the common decency to put the ingredients into a nice pretty bowl first. I just dumped them straight in from the bag or jar. Well, rest assured, it's not because I don't care. It's because I hope I'm illustrating here how this recipe, it's not a big, complicated, scary undertaking. People think of making tortillas from scratch as one of those unattainable skills that if you didn't learn it from your abuela when you were little, you're out of luck. Nope, not the case. Yes, I pour straight from the bag and don't measure to show you that you can do this. Also, I just don't want to do any extra dishes. Now, time to add the wet ingredients. I've cracked 3 eggs into the bowl, and I'm going to add just a splash of water. Don't overdo it on the water initially, or you'll end up with a really sticky dough and you'll have to add more dry ingredients. Just a little splash to start. This is probably a half cup or so. I'm using a fork to mix the wet ingredients in the center, and then little by little, we'll be pulling the dry ingredients into the center mixture, and what we'll get is a mildly tacky, fairly soft, flexible dough. As it gets thicker, I'm going to use my hands to form this into a ball and pick up the last little bits of dry ingredients from our bowl. It will be sticky to the touch, but it shouldn't stick to your hands. If handling the dough ball leaves a lot of pieces or residue on your hands, add just a little bit more almond flour and/or lupin flour to dry things out a bit. We have a nice cohesive ball, so we're going to cover that with a towel and let that rest for about 15 minutes. Go do whatever you'd like for just 15 minutes. Just make sure your hands are clean when you come back. 15 minutes later, we're ready to start making tortillas. Pinch off some dough, more than you think you need to make a single tortilla. This is good. It's just a little tacky, but it's not sticking to my hands. I'm forming this into a disc shape, and I'm covering with a sheet of parchment paper. Now, using a rolling pin, I'm going to roll this out as evenly as I can. I'll periodically run my fingers over this to feel for consistent thickness. We need a nice, big expanse of dough in the center of this blob that is uniformly tortilla thin. Okay, I can tell that I have about 6 inches or so of flat, thin dough right in the middle of this. Let's gently peel off the parchment paper. Again, if you have issues with sticking at this point, it's probably because the dough is too wet. Now, using an upside-down bowl as a guide, I'm cutting out the shape of a tortilla, suppose that's a circle, with a table knife. This needs to be done gently. I don't want to press the bowl down too hard into the dough, and I don't want to press dough against the side of the bowl with the knife. If I do either of these things, we'll have problems with sticking when I try to remove it. Be gentle and keep it light. I'm slowly and carefully peeling the bowl up. If you do have any bits of dough clinging to the edge of the bowl, you don't want it to rip before they separate. Now I'm peeling away the excess tortilla dough and very carefully peeling the tortilla up off the work surface. Use the table knife gently to get it started if you need to. Why is it that the first one of certain recipes always gives you trouble? The first pancake in a batch always comes out a little weird. The first of our savory keto wraps we made gave us some hassles. And this first tortilla today is resisting me. Just one of those strange universal food truths, I guess. Sort of like the inherent inequality of hot dog to bun ratios, or the 1-hour Chinese food satiety principle. If you have any thin spots or little tears in your tortilla, you can patch them with just a tiny pinch of dough. Just press it in as flat as you can. Gently place this onto a medium-high heat pan, skillet, or comal, and this is just going to take about 2 or 3 minutes on this side to be finished. Just enough time to get my second tortilla started. Same as before, I'm rolling it out to a point where I have a uniformly flat, thin expanse of dough big enough in the center to fit our bowl on. The first tortilla is ready to be flipped. Don't forget about this. If you do let one cook for too long, it's not going to be ruined, you just probably won't be able to fold it well. It could be more suitable as a crunchy tostada shell, so don't throw it out. After we flip this, it only takes about 30 to 60 seconds, depending on your cook surface, to be completely done. If your goal is foldable taco shells, always err on the side of underdoneness. You can always cook it more later if you need to. In fact, we'll be doing exactly that when we make some of these into crunchy taco shells. And from this point on, it's basically just rinse and repeat. Roll out the dough, cut out the shape, try to avoid pressing things together too hard so they stick. Prep your next tortilla while you have one cooking, and this will go pretty quickly. They just don't need to cook for that long. So it occurs to me, maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, this is all very well and good, but why would I make keto tacos, my good man? I can pop down to the grocer's and procure a packet of wheat tortillas that advertise only a few grams of carbohydrates per serving, don't you know? First of all, thank you, Your Lordship, for subscribing. I appreciate it. Second, many of the reduced carb tortillas you'll find are actually not that low carb. Many still have 3 or 4 grams of carbs per tortilla, and that adds up quickly, especially if you're trying to keep it under 20 grams per day. That's a common target for many people on a keto diet. Also, let's take a look at the rest of what many packaged low-carb tortillas contain. Here is the list of ingredients found in one low-carb offering from a leading brand of tortillas. I want to point out 2 main things here. The first is the presence of enriched bleached flour. This, right off the bat, is a red flag. If you're strict keto especially, you're avoiding wheat products altogether. This is a non-starter for you. It's the same reason Wonder Bread isn't keto-friendly. The second thing is right there in the middle. Hydrogenated soybean oils. How long have we known that hydrogenated vegetable oils are super bad for you? Decades, I think. Why would a health food contain hydrogenated oils? Because it's cheap and shelf stable. And this isn't a health food. It doesn't come from a health food company. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second here. It comes from a company that makes and sells cheap food to profit as much as possible. It's a company that saw increased demand in the low-carb health food segment of the market, and they said, people, we got to get a piece of that action. And they dumped a bunch of fiber into their existing recipe for cheap, unhealthy tortillas, and they called it low-carb. Food manufacturers did the same thing in the 80s and 90s when fat was considered evil, and low-fat versions of foods were all over the place. Remember fat-free donuts? Fat-free cakes, super healthy, right? No. Bottom line, then and now, it never had anything to do with manufacturing a food that would help you stay healthy. It has always been about making the company more money. Look, if you choose to use a pre-made tortilla, I implore you, read the label and ideally buy one made from alternative flours from a health food company. One that has always been a health food company, not a cheap mass production food company that's attempting to worm its way into the low-carb food market. Okay, tinfoil hat is coming off. Let's get back to cooking. If you're someone who did learn to make authentic tortillas at some point in your life, and you feel that the old school hand patting method is the only way to form a good tortilla, you can try it with this. By default, that method will give you a slightly thicker end product, but it can work. I've tried it. I recommend keeping a small amount of water or oil at the ready. If you do this, you'll probably need some lubrication to form this dough into tortillas by hand. Well, we've reached our final portion of dough, just enough for one more tortilla. So for this one, I'm not going to worry about using the bowl to shape it. I'm going to try to roll it out as carefully and evenly as possible. The tricky thing about this method is that the edges of a rolled tortilla will inevitably be thinner than the center, which means that the edges will cook a little faster, which means they'll be easier to burn if you're not really watching it like a hawk. So be vigilant. And that's that. We have a nice stack of tortillas ready to go, all nice and uniformly sized, except for our more rustic final tortilla. Excuse me. There we go. They are nice and flexible. They are foldable. And they are rollable. These would make great enchiladas or flautas. Of course, as is, they are perfect for a tasty soft taco. Now we come to what, for me, was the most exciting development that came out of this recipe. Crunchy taco shells. It's pretty easy, too. I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch, it's about 1/3 of a centimeter, of avocado oil in a skillet. I want it that deep. I'm heating this just to medium heat. Avocado oil can take pretty high heat, but almond flour can't. We need to keep this around 320 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 160 degrees Celsius. And we'll need a way to form and hold our tortillas in a taco shape as we cook them. I'm going to use this stainless steel taco scaffolding. You just wrap the tortilla around the frame and then gently clip it in place for a perfectly shaped, flat-bottomed, self-standing taco shell. Easy. I'm putting 2 of these into our hot avocado oil, and they won't take long, just about 1 minute per side. Of course, if you have a fryer with a taco rack in it, you'll be able to turn out many of these very quickly. I recommend turning these a few times as you go. Again, almond flour will burn much easier than cornmeal. I'm cooking these on all sides to a golden brown. I also want to be sure that while they are laying on their sides, the oil is deep enough to cook the inside of the shell as well. Add a little more oil if you need to make sure the inside cooks too. These are looking nice. This is about as dark as I'm going to let these get right here. Any more than this and we'd start to get that bitter, burnt nut flavor from the almond flour. These look great. I've removed these to a taco stand to finish cooling. I took off the outer clip, but I'm going to leave the center frame in so they don't close up as they cool. If you're making more tacos and you need the interior scaffolding right now, you can let these shells finish cooling hanging upside down on the bars of a wire oven rack. We now have an assortment of soft and crunchy shells. Let's make something to fill them with. Some good old-fashioned taco meat. In a pan over medium-high heat, we're going to start by adding a splash of avocado oil and sautéing some chopped onions until they start to give up some of their moisture and become slightly translucent. Once that happens, we're adding some finely chopped garlic, at least 2 or 3 cloves, and then in goes our ground beef. Just so you can figure the rough proportions, I'm using a pound or about 450 grams of beef. This is 80-20, by the way. I tend to not go with lower fat meats in many things because fat is typically the macronutrient that most people have trouble getting enough of on a ketogenic diet. If you don't strain it off when you're done cooking this, you're going to notice it's in there. And to some people, this might seem greasy and unappealing. So if that's you, you can use a lower fat mixture of beef for this, since it's meant to have sort of a crumbly texture anyway. Or you can drain out some of the grease. In fact, if you were going to do that, now would be the time, when the beef is nicely browned. You would just sweep all the cooked meat to one side of the pan, tip it a little bit, and then use a paper towel or a baster to remove the grease from the pan. Not going to do that today though, so next we're going to season this up real nice. This should come as no surprise. I'm using a hefty blob of our zesty chili paste from episode 8 of series 1. This is spicy and smoky and just leaps and bounds beyond what you get from any prepackaged version. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. So you can use chili powder if you simply must. I'm going to advise you to be cautious about using a prepackaged taco seasoning, however, unless you're sure that it doesn't contain added sugars or unnecessary starches or anti-caking additives. Food manufacturers love to sneak sugar into that sort of seasoning. We're now going to add the rest of what any good taco seasoning would contain anyway. We've already got the chili. Now we're going to add a generous couple tablespoons of cumin. That is a crucial taco flavor. At least a few teaspoons of smoked paprika. And I'm also adding in a splash of brine from a jar of our easy pickled jalapenos, episode 1 of series 1. This is optional, but highly recommended. If you have some time and some jalapenos, hit pause, go watch series 1, episode 1, and make those pickled jalapenos. They are so good. Next, in goes probably about a cup and a half of chicken stock. Chicken bouillon in water works too. Don't worry about the exact amount. Even if you feel you've added too much, we're going to simmer this and let the liquid reduce down, so it will be fine. Also, I want to acknowledge that some folks like a little more tomato-y flavor in their taco meat. If that's you, add a small amount of tomato paste at this point and mix that in. Me, I'm going to leave that out today, and I'm just going to finish this with a nice bay leaf. And just a couple shakes of oregano. Mexican if you have it, Italian if you don't. And we'll let that simmer on medium heat, stirring occasionally to make sure nothing burns or cooks too long on the bottom, for about 10 to 15 minutes until things are looking thicker. While we simmer, I feel I need to address what, for many of you, may be the sort of elephant in the room. We're making tacos today, not tacos. Tacos, not tacos. Tacos, not tacos. Tacos, real authentic tacos varieties have names like al pastor, al carbón, a la parrilla, and de mariscos. Tacos, on the other hand, have names like Supreme, Macho Nacho, and Diablo Loco Grande Deluxe. You see the difference? Make no mistake, we're making tacos today. Straight up, Americanized, unapologetically Tex-Mex-ish tacos. If you were fortunate enough to grow up eating authentic Mexican or Central or South American tacos, I am envious, and will most likely do at least one episode in the future featuring authentic tacos preparations. Keep an eye out for that. Just wanted to be clear about what this is and what this isn't. Our taco meat has been simmering for just about 15 minutes, and I can tell the liquids have reduced and the sauce looks a little bit thicker. However, there is still a distinct separation between the chunks of meat and the juices. True taco meat should be almost like a very thick, chunky meat sauce. Traditionally, a few tablespoons of masa, cornmeal, would serve as a thickening agent, but we would add a considerable number of carbs. We don't want to do that. So let's switch off the heat, and we're going to use just a couple shakes of baking powder, not baking soda, as our thickener. Yes, it's true, most baking powders do contain a small amount of cornstarch, but it is very small, negligible even. We're going to get a fun little fizzy reaction as we mix it in. We did add a splash of that vinegary pickled jalapeno brine earlier, remember? Once that subsides, the liquid portion of our meat will be thickened noticeably. I'm actually going to hit this with just a little more to make sure it's thick enough to work. Okay, we're ready. Let's make some tacos. Using taco stands in a quad bay configuration, we're going to place in our beautiful tortillas. The hard shells are cool now, they can come off the scaffolding. And there are our soft, flexible tortillas. Each one gets a generous helping of our juicy, seasoned beef. And tell you what, let's make a couple of these into tacos supreme, which in the time-honored traditions of my people means that we're adding sour cream and chopped tomatoes and upcharging an additional 29 cents. Next, let's add some fresh, crispy lettuce chopped long and thin. I think iceberg lettuce would be consistent with a fast food taco recipe, but I want this to add some actual nutrition, so I'm using green leaf lettuce. Romaine lettuce would work really well too. And if you want to infuse this with even more extra greens, or maybe sneak some fresh veggies into the diet of a disagreeable young child, you could mix in some finely chopped spinach. Next, cheese, glorious cheese. This is a blend of Monterey Jack and mild yellow cheddar. That's pretty much the extent of the toppings that make up a classic taco. Maybe add a little bit of spice with some of those pickled jalapenos, or a little bit of your favorite hot sauces. And there we have it. Genuine, low-carb, healthy versions of Americanized, inauthentic Latin American culinary classics. What a convoluted sentence. I said it at the beginning, folks. I said, we're bringing them back. We're bringing back tacos. And bring back tacos we did, without compromising the nutritional value of the meal, without using some massive food corporation's thinly veiled cash-grabby lab experiment to make it happen. And I will make this pledge to you. In episodes to come, you can bet you'll be seeing these again, including in some recipes for genuine, authentic tacos. Stay with Kettle and Bones for many, many more ways to make versions of the food you love that will love you back. Aww. But for now, just enjoy your soft and crunchy tacos.